Richard Bong's dogfight on December 27th, 1942 is only the first of many he'll have during his record-setting career. In time, he'll establish an almost legendary reputation as one of the best sticks to ever strap into a fighter plane. But like many other outstanding U.S. combat pilots in World War II, there's nothing in his background that could possibly foreshadow such amazing accomplishments.
Well, Richard Bong was born in Poplar, Wisconsin in 1920. He was the first of 9 children, and they all worked on the family farm. But at the age of 8, he saw airplanes flying over the house, and he decided he was going to become a pilot. And from that point on, that was pretty much his goal in life.
Bong fulfills his goal during the late 1930s in the civilian pilot training program.
Civilian pilot training for Richard Bong gave him the opportunity to learn how to fly while he was going to college, and he eagerly took advantage of that.
Soon after World War II erupts in December 1941, Bong starts training in the P-38 Lightning. Almost from the beginning, he displays the deft piloting skills that will help make him such a tremendous success.
Bong was seen by almost everyone that saw him fly as a very, very smooth flyer. Of course, he had the excellent eyesight that you need to be a successful fighter pilot, but he also had the ability to think ahead. A lot of the people that flew with him could tell that when they'd get into a situation that would happen rapidly, Dick Bong was already a couple of steps ahead of everybody else in what was going on and where to be and where to get the advantage on the enemy.
Yet unlike a lot of other fighter jocks, Bong isn't cocky, at least not outwardly.
He was very quiet, very thoughtful. He certainly wasn't prone to showboating or arrogance, but he also had a confidence about him which belied his farm boy demeanor. He was only 5'6" and about 155 pounds, so he wasn't very large in physical stature. But inside, he had a determination and a confidence and an intensity that was probably born of the hard work he did growing up on a farm. He was very, very capable and knew it.
Soon, Bong's inner confidence and his remarkable flying skills start to pay off with victories in the air. But amazingly, Bong does it all with one glaring weakness as a combat pilot.
Admittedly, Bong would tell the press that his gunnery was not the best. He honestly said, "I'm a lousy shot. I simply get behind him or come at him from the front and fire away." But actually, after he had about 21 victories, he was sent home on leave and went back through gunnery school and picked up the training that he needed to make himself better at deflection shooting.
It's during the leave back in the States that Bong also meets and becomes engaged to a beautiful young college student named Marjorie Vattendahl. When he returns to his unit, Bong's not only a much better shot, but also has the name and picture of his new fiancée stenciled on his P-38. By this time, there's an informal race between the top aces in the European and Pacific theaters to see who will be the ace of aces among all U.S. pilots. Bong's overall commander, 5th Air Force Boss General George Kenney, wants that ace to come from his command. So he handpicks 3 pilots who he thinks are most likely to win the ace race. One is Bong's former flight leader, Tom Lynch. Another is Bong himself. The third is a moody but extremely capable P-38 driver named Tommy McGuire.
Although Bong really didn't seem to see it as a vital race, McGuire was just absolutely keen on catching Bong and was extremely frustrated as every time he would get 2 victories, Bong would get 2 victories. And it seemed like it went on for days. And in fact, McGuire was behind by 8. And then he was behind by 8 again. And every day that there was more victories piling up, he was still behind.
This ace race will end up having tragic consequences. But for young Richard Bong in December 1942, all that's in the future. In fact, by Christmas of '42, he hasn't even flown his plane in combat. However, he has had a chance to begin learning that other important part of a combat pilot's skill set, tactics. Just like all other P-38 drivers, Bong starts with the basics.
Bong was a green, raw fighter pilot. He really had no tactics other than tactics that he was taught in training initially. For P-38s, offensively, they were taught to make high-speed diving attacks, to turn with the enemy only as long as they could keep their nose out in front of the enemy.
This is something us fighter pilots call pulling lead. That's when you're shooting ahead of the enemy plane, so your bullets and the bandit's aircraft arrive at the same point in space at the same time.
When they could no longer do that because the enemy could outturn them, they were taught to dive away from the fight to get some distance because they could outrun the enemy in a dive. Once they had some distance, then they would climb up in a shallow, high-speed climb and get lots of separation from the fight and then turn around and reattack.
That's pretty much what all P-38 drivers are taught to do on offense. But what about when the Zeros are attacking them?
Defensively, they were taught to turn hard into the attack and try to make a head-on pass and shoot the enemy head-on. Once they made this high-speed head-on attack, they would dive away, get some separation, climb back up at a shallow angle, high-speed climb, and then they could come back and fight again if they wanted to.
A head-on attack against any fighter is a very dangerous maneuver. Not only can the enemy shoot back at you at the same time you're trying to shoot him, but you also risk a mid-air collision. However, with the Lightning's concentration of firepower in the nose, a head-on attack against the lightly armored Zero can be a pretty good bet for a P-38 driver. Yet even with the Lightning's heavy armament, their pilots still never want to take on the Zeros alone.
They would normally fight as a two-ship element with a leader and a wingman. The wingman would fly formation about a 30-degree cone around the leader. The leader would do all the maneuvering and the fighting and the shooting. The wingman was totally defensive. His responsibility was to keep a good visual lookout behind the element and protect them from a surprise attack.
The Zero drivers also prefer to fight in groups. But instead of pairs of fighters, their formations are based on groups of three.
Three fighters that they called a show tie. They'd arrange these three fighters in a loose V formation or a staggered trail formation, and they quite often, each individual fighter might weave around so that they could check their rear more easily. They would normally combine 2 or 3 of these show tie together into a flight called a shoe tie. And just like the show tie element of 3 aircraft, they would arrange each show tie in a staggered trail or a loose V formation. Zeros typically escorted bombers from behind and high and trail, and they would attack in trail. So they had the 3 fighters, they would peel off and come in consecutively, one after the other, for consecutive rear quarter attacks on the enemy. Then they would zoom back up above the enemy, come around and try another attack.
Like the Americans, once the Japanese are engaged in a fight, they prefer to stick together.
Normally they would pick one fighter, one target, and they would make individual attacks, but the 3 aircraft would try to stay together for mutual support. Defensively, if they were attacked, they would try to turn and make a head-on firing pass against the enemy. If the enemy was behind them, they would quite often make a very steep climbing turn that the attacker couldn't follow. And then they might also make a loop back over the top of the fighter and attack him from high and behind. Another favorite tactic was a steep zoom climb. They would climb up and the attacker wouldn't be able to follow them. The attacker would stall, fall off, and then the Zero would fall down on top of him and shoot him from the rear in the dive.
Unlike the Zero's groups of 3, P-38 formations are based on multiples of the standard U.S. element of 2 fighters. By the time Richard Bong is ready for his first combat patrol in late December of 1942, he's well schooled on the basics about his plane and the tactics he'll use while flying in combat. But there's still one thing he doesn't know. In fact, he can't know. It's the same question that hangs over every service person before we go into battle for the first time. How will I do during my first trial by fire?
Red flight leader to red flight. Don't get spread out. Keep your formation on my aircraft.
Roger that. Roger. Roger, boss.
Lynch leads a flight of 4 Lightnings on a defensive counter-air mission. They're the fourth element of a total of 12 P-38s that are vectored to intercept the formation of Japanese planes that are trying to attack Bong's airfield near Port Moresby, New Guinea. By now, Bong has flown several combat patrol missions, but he has yet to face the enemy in combat. Lynch is leading his formation up to about 25,000 feet. Since the Lightning was designed to intercept high-flying strategic bombers and is equipped with superchargers for its twin Allison engines, it has a good rate of climb, and the 38s will soon set their angels, which is a term used for altitude.
Red flight leader to red flight. Double check your oxygen systems. I don't want anyone blacking out up here.
Roger. Double checking now.
Roger, same for Red 3.
Red 2, double checking oxygen system.
And Dick, if we spot any bandits, you stick to me like glue, understand?
Yes, sir.
Up here, Lynch knows he'll have the advantage over the Mitsubishi Zeros flying cover for the Japanese strike mission, which will probably be coming in at a much lower altitude. This will give Lynch and his pilots the initiative in the coming dogfight. In simple terms, that's the ability to drive the attack. And decide when they should break off the attack by climbing back up to higher altitude. And for a fighter pilot, having the initiative can make a world of difference.
Going to ground control, the red flight leader. Going to ground control, the red flight leader. About 40 bandits in your area.
Red flight leader to Buna, copy that. What's their altitude?
Going to ground control, the red flight leader. Foot form at around 14,000 feet.
And there they are, about 10,000 feet below. It's a swarm of Zeros flying in a protective umbrella above a large formation of Japanese dive bombers. Lynch has positioned his 38s perfectly for a diving strike at the enemy planes. Despite the Lightning's problems with compressibility in his steep dive, which by this time has not yet been solved by the addition of dive flaps, Lynch and his pilots know the P-38 is still superior to the Zero in a dive. Okay, the Japanese pilots have spotted the P-38s. Normally by now, the always aggressive Zero drivers should be climbing up towards the 38s to engage. But they seem to be hesitating. It must be because the 38s are new to this area and they've never seen this strange-looking American plane in combat before. But Lynch doesn't wait. He immediately leads his flight down into a screaming dive. No worries about compressibility here. This group of pilots is focused on one thing, stopping those enemy planes before they can bomb their airfield. Bong is right where a wingman should be, in an echelon formation off Lynch to protect his 6 as they charge into the enemy planes. It quickly turns into a major furball, with 38s and Zeros merging, and then twisting and turning all over the sky. Their tracer fire streaking in every direction. Lynch is flying very aggressively, and it's all Bong can do just to keep up with them. Remember, this is Bong's first time in actual combat. And I can tell you, from personal experience in flying over Yugoslavia in 1999, that no matter how good a pilot you are or how realistic your training is, there is nothing like the first time a real live enemy is shooting at you with real live bullets. But Bong's holding it together, making all the moves a good wingman should. He's watching Lynch like a hawk and lashed to him like a biting sow. And somehow manages to keep glued in the right position just off of his 6 o'clock. Yet he still checks behind him to scan for enemy Zeros that are getting close to their 6 o'clock. Now this is a dream wingman. But even with all of that on his plate, Bong's still trying to take some offensive action. He spots a Zero flashing by in front of him and squeezes off a quick burst, but scores no hits. And now he follows Lynch through a steep turn as Lynch tries to set up for a deflection shot on another Zero. In the middle of the turn, Bond fires another burst in a second Zero, but again with no hits. He lets loose with yet another burst on a third Zero, and still nothing. Okay, here's a fourth Zero moving in through Bong's sights. And this one's so focused on the lightning he's firing at, he doesn't even see Bong. Bong's taking careful aim and he squeezes off a long burst. Wow, he missed that one too. At this point, Bong has got to be getting frustrated. He's totally whiffed on 4 shots in a row, and now he's running low on ammo too. Uh-oh, all right, here's trouble. A Zero has maneuvered behind Lynch and is setting up for an easy gun attack, but Bong reacts quickly. He cranks on the rudders, yawing his lightning slightly into the Zero and squeezes off a quick burst. Normally, yawing a fighter during a gunshot is not a good idea.
That's because it's almost like flying your plane sideways, making it very difficult to predict the path of your bullets.
But Bong's shot wasn't aimed to kill, just to let the Zero pilot know he's not alone, and it does the job. The Zero immediately makes away sharply to disengage. Even after all hell has broke loose, Bong's still doing a great job as a wingman. And now Bong's got even more trouble. While he was focused on cleaning the Zero off of Lynch's tail, another Zero is parked right at Bong's 6. It's about the worst situation you can be in, and unfortunately Bong hasn't got a wingman to come to his rescue. Bong may as well forget about getting any kills today. He's going to need all the piloting skills he can muster just to get out of this fight alive.